I noticed it before I even made it to the kettle. The metal tin on the bookshelf, my old biscuit tin I used for savings, wasn't flush against the back like it always was. I hadn't touched it since last week. Maybe longer, but now it sat angled slightly forward, just enough to catch the light. I didn't move toward it right away. I poured the water, waited for the boil. I watched the steam cloud the window above the sink. My fingers curled around the edge of the counter, and I listened for the usual sounds. The refrigerator hummed, the heater clicking on. No doors creaked. No footsteps on the porch. Just me. When I opened the tin, I knew. The money was there, but different. I always folded my bills into neat thirds. These were halved some upside down and not stacked how I'd left them. Someone had opened it. Not just once. Someone had rummaged. I sat down, hands still damp from the rinse. My mind traced the past few days like a pencil, following an old crack in the wall. Chelsea had come by 3 times this week, Tuesday, Thursday, and again yesterday. She brought canned soup, a new shower curtain, and that lemon-scented spray I never use. She always insists she just wants to help. Said the house smelled like old paper and quiet. I laughed it off then. Now I wasn't so sure. I didn't want to believe she would touch my things, but nothing else made sense. The tin was up high, tucked between my gardening books and Harold's favorite Western. No one else had been here. Not the mailman, not neighbors. Just her. I told myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe she saw it while dusting. Maybe she moved it without thinking. But that's not how Chelsea dusts. She doesn't linger near bookshelves. She avoids them like they hold memories she doesn't want to see. I left the tin where it was and made my tea. I needed to be sure before I said a word. I needed to see what else might be out of place. Chelsea showed up around 11, balancing 2 plastic bags in one hand and a gallon of milk in the other. "You didn't have to go out today, Mom," she said with a grin too wide for a Saturday morning. "I brought everything you like." She moved fast like always. Straight to the kitchen unloading items without asking where anything went. Carrots, celery, chicken thighs. Then a few things I hadn't asked for. A new brand of crackers, a jar of imported olives, scented candles I don't use. "Thought you could use a little pick-me-up," she said, setting them on the counter like they were a gift. I nodded, thanked her, and dried my hands on a towel that had gone thin from years of use. We stood side by side, sorting through the produce. She made small talk about the weather, a new client at work, some drama in her building. But I was watching her eyes. They moved too quickly, too deliberately, glancing down the hall to the left, toward the linen closet, and then toward the drawer in the hallway table. She never used to look around like that. It used to be about the coffee, or the couch, or the weathered puzzle box we'd never finished. She reached into a lower cabinet, pulled out a cutting board without asking. "I thought I'd prep some of this for you," she said. "You don't need to be chopping when your wrists are hurting." That part wasn't a lie. The arthritis had been worse lately. After she left, I walked the hallway in silence. Nothing looked out of place. But when I opened the second drawer under the table, I knew it had been touched. The edge of the manila folder had been pushed inward. My birth certificate was out of order, and the property deed I kept sealed in the plastic sleeve folded slightly at the corner, as if someone had pulled it out halfway. I pressed the folder flat again and closed the drawer without sound. It was time to stop waiting for proof. I needed to see it for myself. It arrived 2 days later in a plain brown box, no label, except my name scribbled in black ink. I'd picked the smallest one I could find. Motion-activated wireless disguised as a smoke detector. I told myself I wasn't being paranoid. I wasn't looking to catch anyone. I just needed to see clearly again. I stood on the kitchen chair and mounted it above the bookshelf, careful not to leave fingerprints on the lens. From that angle, it faced the living room part of the hallway and the spot where I'd always kept the tin. I didn't tell anyone. Not the neighbor across the street. not the pharmacist I chatted with every Thursday. It was mine, this decision. Quiet like the doubt that had been growing under my ribs. Chelsea came by the next afternoon. She stayed longer than usual. I offered tea. She said no. She wiped down the table even though I'd already done it. She picked up a stack of unopened mail and asked if I needed help sorting through anything. "Just keeping you organized, Mom?" she said, with that same bright tone. Then she disappeared down the hall. I pretended not to notice. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the footage on my tablet. My hand trembled slightly as I tapped through the file. She didn't take anything. She opened the tin, counted the bills one by one, whispered something I couldn't hear. I turned up the volume and pressed my ear to the speaker. She won't notice. She never does. I watched her put everything back in. Close the lid carefully, slide it against the back wall of the shelf, just like I always did. Then she smiled at the camera. Or maybe not at the camera, just at herself, satisfied. I closed the tablet and placed it face down beside me. My chest felt heavy. I didn't feel anger, just something colder than that. The next morning I watched her bring in a folder. This time she wasn't alone. Chelsea arrived just before noon, dressed like she was heading to an office-pressed slacks, shiny flats hair pinned up too neatly for a casual visit. She held a manila folder in one hand and a to-go coffee in the other. "Got you one too," she said, setting the cup on the table. It wasn't my usual blend. She didn't ask. She opened the folder halfway through lunch after complimenting the soup but not finishing it. "These are just some things to look over," she said. Casual, like we were planning a vacation. Health stuff, end-of-life directives, power of attorney. Nothing urgent, but I thought it'd be smart to get ahead of it. She didn't meet my eyes when she said it. Just slid the papers across the table and tapped the top corner with her nail. "We'll talk later. Just glance at them when you feel up to it." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I only nodded and placed the folder by the salt shaker. She smiled the same tight smile I'd seen on the camera the night before and offered to take the trash out before she left. I watched her from the window, pausing in the driveway, speaking to someone in her car I couldn't quite see. That night, I turned the volume up higher. The camera had picked up more than I expected. Chelsea was on her phone, pacing by the dining table, her voice lower than usual. "I'm telling you, once I have her signature, it's done. We'll file before the end of the month." A pause. Then no, she won't read them. She trusts me. Just smile and don't rush her. Let me handle it. I pressed pause. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. My heart beat slow and steady, like it knew this was coming. I slid the folder into the drawer beneath the phone book and locked it. In the morning, I would call someone who could help me see through every page. The office was small, tucked between a dry cleaner and a dental clinic with a faded blue awning and no receptionist. I waited in the front room, a manila envelope on my lap, still warm from where I'd held it too tightly the whole drive. The woman at the coffee shop next door had given me the name. Said her cousin used him when her brother tried to steal the family farm. Mr. Nevin couldn't have been more than 30. Polite, soft-spoken, and patient in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. He didn't blink when I told him about the folder or the footage or my daughter's sudden interest in future planning. He just nodded and asked, "Do you still have the documents I handed them over without a word?" He read in silence. His eyes narrowed only once on the third page. "Don't sign anything," he said quietly, "even if she asks again. Especially if she brings someone with her next time." I sat straighter. "So what do I do?" "We don't need to confront," he said. "We just protect." And that's exactly what we did. Over the next hour, he walked me through the steps. We opened a new checking account, rerouted my pension into it, and froze the old one until I could close it properly. We began paperwork to move the deed into a revocable trust, naming myself as trustee and sole beneficiary. He showed me where to sign, and where not to. Every move was quiet official and sealed with nothing louder than a pen against paper. I didn't feel triumphant walking out of there. I felt calm, like a gate had closed softly behind me. When I got home, the house looked the same, but something in me had shifted. I put the new papers in the sewing cabinet and locked the drawer. The old folder, the one Chelsea gave me, I left on the kitchen table. The next morning, she came back with more than just groceries. Chelsea rang the bell this time, even though she had her own key. That alone made me suspicious. She was dressed again like she had somewhere important to be, and behind her stood a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, mid-50s maybe, with a black clipboard and a polite smile. "This is Thomas," she said lightly, waving him in as though I'd invited him. "He's a notary. I just thought, let's get the paperwork out of the way. One less thing to worry about." I kept my hands folded. "You should have called." "I wanted it to be a surprise," she said, eyes glinting. "Good surprises, Mom. I'm just trying to help." Thomas said little. He unpacked his seal and flipped through the pages, smoothing the corners as if preparing a contract instead of an ambush. Chelsea set the folder down and handed me a pen. "You don't have to read all of it again. It's the same version." I held the pen for a moment, then let my hand tremble just slightly. "I haven't eaten yet. My sugar's low," I murmured, forcing a soft laugh. "Let me make dinner first. I'll sign after." Chelsea frowned just for a second. "We don't have to rush." "You're right," I said, patting her hand. "Let's take our time." While the pasta boiled, I excused myself to the laundry room. I opened the folder, slid the pages out and replaced them with blank printer paper, 3 sheets carefully clipped. The originals went into the sewing basket beneath my spools of thread. Dinner was polite. Chelsea picked at her food. The notary watched the clock. When she placed the folder back in her bag, she didn't open it. "We'll finalize it later," she said. "No worries." I walked them to the door, smiling gently as they left. She kissed my cheek without looking at me. That night, I left the camera on while I slept, just in case she came back without knocking. The rain started just before sunrise, steady and cold, the kind that made the air feel heavier even indoors. I let it fall for most of the morning, listening to it tap against the kitchen window while I reheated leftover soup and reread the trust documents. By noon, I was standing outside the county clerk's office, coat zipped up, folder in hand. I hadn't planned to go, but something about the way Chelsea lingered near the back room last week had settled like a stone in my chest. The office was half lit and smelled faintly of damp carpet. A young woman behind the counter took my ID and asked how she could help. "I just want to confirm the title on my property," I said. "I brought proof of ownership." She nodded, typing quickly. Her expression didn't change until it did. "There's a pending transfer request," she said, squinting at the screen. "Submitted online. It hasn't been approved, just flagged for manual review. Your name is listed as the grantor, and Chelsea Whitlow as the recipient." I felt my throat tighten. "Was that your intention, ma'am?" "No," I said flatly. She leaned back in her chair, eyebrows slightly raised. "Then someone submitted this without your knowledge." She printed a copy and slid it across the counter. My name was there. The signature looked like mine at a glance. Not enough for anyone who knew my handwriting. She tapped the corner. "Would you like to file a fraud report? I can start it today." I held the paper in both hands and stared at the curve of my forged signature. It was too neat. Chelsea always did have a better hand than I did. "Not yet," I said, folding the sheet and slipping it into my coat. I just needed to know. She didn't argue, just nodded and handed me a stamped receipt. I stepped back out into the rain without opening my umbrella. The water ran down the collar of my coat, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel cold. I just felt ready. Because that night, I saw someone else on the camera, and he wasn't supposed to be there. I almost didn't check the footage that night. I was tired, bone tired. The kind that settles in your shoulders and doesn't leave no matter how many cups of tea you drink. But something told me to look. Just to be sure, just to keep the thread unbroken. The camera caught movement around 3:12 p.m. 30 minutes after Chelsea said she'd dropped by just to bring some fresh eggs. I hadn't answered the door. I'd been upstairs folding laundry with the fan on thinking she'd left. But she hadn't left. She had let herself in. And she wasn't alone. The man came in behind her tall, dark jacket, didn't remove his shoes. I didn't recognize him. I paused. The video studied his face. Nothing familiar. Not a neighbor. Not anyone I'd ever met at church or around town. He walked straight to the hall cabinet, opened it without hesitation. Chelsea followed behind, phone in hand. "That one," he said, pointing at the glass front curio. "That's worth a few grand easy. Especially if it's solid." Chelsea leaned in, pressed on one of the hinges. "It's real, no veneer. Mom still thinks I'm helping. She's slow, not stupid." The words didn't hit all at once. They came in pieces, like cold drops of water leaking through a roof. He chuckled. "You sure she's not recording you?" "If she was," Chelsea said, glancing around, "we'd know by now." "I've checked." I didn't move for a full minute. I just let the silence of the room hold me the way a hospital room holds its breath after a diagnosis. They left quietly. No drawers slammed, no shouts or footsteps. Just the door closing behind them like nothing happened. I saved the footage twice, once on the tablet, once on a flash drive. I labeled it something boring and tucked it into a sock in the bottom of my drawer. By morning, I had already called the lawyer back. Because Chelsea was coming over for Sunday lunch, and this time I would be ready. She arrived with tulips. Yellow ones, my least favorite, though she used to know that. Her smile was all teeth, and her laugh was too light, like she'd already decided everything would go her way. I opened the door before she knocked. "Come in, Chelsea." She talked the whole way to the kitchen. About traffic, about the weather, about how tired she was from helping a friend move. She didn't mention Thursday. She didn't ask about the folder. She didn't say a word about the man who walked through my hallway and pointed at my life like it was a showroom. I made her tea. She drank half. "You look good," she said, eyes flitting around the room. "Have you been sleeping better?" "I have," I said softly. "It helps when things are in order." We sat for 20 minutes. I let her lead the conversation. She asked about the garden, my neighbor's new dog, a show I hadn't watched. Her voice danced around the edges of what she wanted. Then I stood up. "Give me a moment," I said. I went to the cabinet in the sewing room and unlocked the drawer. The envelope was already sealed. I walked back slowly, my steps even. Chelsea was still sipping tea when I placed the letter in front of her. Her hands didn't move right away. "It's from Mr. Nevin," I said. "My lawyer." She opened it. Her lips pressed tight. Her eyes moved faster than her breath. The letter was short. It confirmed the house had been placed in a living trust. All financial assets had been moved and secured. Health directives were in place. No outside power of attorney would be recognized. No new signatures needed. Her mouth opened, but nothing came. "I just wanted to help," she finally whispered. I looked at her not unkindly. "I know." She didn't finish her tea. The tulips sat unopened in their wrapping. By Tuesday, I'd changed the locks and had the security system reset. The locksmith came on a Thursday afternoon. He was quiet, efficient, didn't ask many questions. Just nodded when I pointed at the front and side doors, then offered to add a keypad lock on the back if I wanted. I agreed, and he installed it in under an hour. When he handed me the new set of keys, I felt the weight of them in my palm, solid and unfamiliar. I thanked him, paid in cash, and watched him drive away through the screen door. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. It wasn't that kind of moment. Later, I took the little camera down from its hiding spot above the bookshelf. I wrapped it in a dish towel and walked it over to the church donation bin. Maybe someone else needed to see what they couldn't prove yet. I hoped they'd find what they needed faster than I had. Back home, I unpacked the pantry. Not because it needed it, but because I wanted to. I arranged the canned goods by size, lined up the spices, wiped down the shelves until the cloth came back clean. No footsteps followed me. No eyes tracked me from the hall. No questions about what I was doing or why I was moving things again. I made tea and drank it by the window as the sun faded behind the neighbor's roof. It was quiet, not heavy, not waiting, just quiet. Later that night, I turned off every light myself, locked every door, and climbed into bed with the windows open. The air smelled like wet earth and distant pine. I lay there, listening, not for danger, not for footsteps or whispers. Just the natural creak of the house settling back into itself. I didn't check my phone. I didn't check the camera feed. I didn't need to. Somewhere inside me, something had been returned. Not all at once, and not without cost, but enough to sleep.